When I went for my final comprehensive evaluation in seminary, I was, of course, nervous. The professors who were delivering the evaluation were people I had had in at least one class. They knew me. They knew my work ethic. They knew my abilities, and they knew my weaknesses. But this was more than being evaluated for a degree. This was about being evaluated as ready to be a minister. As I climbed the stairs to the office, I began to think to myself, what on earth am I doing here? My work isn't good enough. I'm not smart enough. They're going to tell me that I'm not ready. I had to literally shake my head to get those thoughts out and remind myself that as much as I could be, I was qualified. I was ready. And that I was probably smarter than the average bear. In AA, this is called stinkin' thinking, or the committee, because of all the disparate thoughts that bounce around in our heads, telling us things that make us feel less than we really are. And my experience is absolutely common. Often when we are evaluated or challenged or simply going out to be with people, we have negative thoughts that mess with us. Inner demons are things we personally struggle with in our minds. If we say to ourselves things like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, I'll never be able to, my faith is too weak, I can't do something because if I try, they'll figure out that I'm a fraud. Things like that are inner demons. The limiting or negative nature of these thoughts is what gives them their name. They are often created by situations that lead us to believe that we need to hide. And so they move from our thoughts into our actions, our way of speaking, and our attitudes. We hide what we think of as insufficient or ugly about ourselves. We rob ourselves of a lot of time and energy and self-respect. Inner demons are not supernatural. They are part of the human condition. Unless you think that this is purely about psychology, it is, in a great part, spiritual. The Bible is full of examples of people who are battling their inner demons, and we often read of their struggles. God called many people that we admire in faith, but they did battle thinking they were not good enough or that they were damaged and couldn't do what God asked. Now, some of these insecurities just seem to come naturally. As I said, they're part of the human condition. But some of these struggles begin because of the messages we hear from other people through their words or their behaviors toward us. If a child is told over and over again that he will not amount to anything, he begins to believe that even if the evidence in front of him does not support that belief. If someone is ignored while growing up, they will assume that they don't matter. If people call us stupid or bad or worthless, we internalize those abuses and begin to falsely own them in our lives, and they affect us in negative ways. It doesn't take much to plant those seeds, but it takes a lot of effort to dig out the weeds they produce from our souls. Many people in our faith history responded to God's call on their lives by saying things like, "No one would listen to me. I'm too old. I'm too young. I don't have enough faith. I'm not resourceful or creative. I can't because I'm not enough." And their arguments got absolutely nowhere with God, because God always says, "You can, and I'll be with you while you do." Years ago, there was a campaign against this kind of thinking, and the slogan was, "God doesn't make junk." And that is so true. Inner demons give us conflicting messages within ourselves, but also in our relations with others. For example, we know that we are not born with an attitude of hatred or malice or fear. These are things that develop in us as we grow up, and they come primarily through our environment. We receive messages from our family, our community, and even our church that manifest themselves in attitudes and actions of hatred, malice, and fear. And prejudice is, by and large, about fear. And if the environment in which we grow up is fearful, it will choose a group to hate in order to assuage that fear. And that's why people who have never met someone who is Muslim can say that they hate Muslims, or illegals, or homeless people, or in Jesus' time, Samaritans. All the evidence in the world can be in front of us that we should not be fearful of those people. Yet the inner demons in us tell us that they are to be feared. The nastiness of inner demons is powerful because if they are not exposed, they reach into our lives in ways that are absolutely destructive. People who are negative, permissive, out of control, constantly creating drama, and bullies are actually struggling with their inner demons. If you have to always be in the know or in control or dismissive, you're struggling with inner demons. And the only way to eliminate inner demons is to examine our attitudes about ourselves and others and take corrective action in light of the real evidence. And I believe this is part of our spiritual journey as we seek to be more and more Christ-like. The disciples tried to heal a man's son who had epilepsy, but their efforts were unsuccessful. When Jesus heard what didn't happen, he said what may seem to be harsh words, especially if you read the text in an angry voice. But I imagine that Jesus was not angry. I imagine him to be a bit heartbroken with the disciples because while they were trying to heal the son, they continued to struggle with their own inner demons. O faithless and perverse generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? He'd been with them almost 24/7 for a couple of years. He was constantly teaching them and showing them and challenging them to examine themselves in the light of God's mercy and grace. And then, with their new insight, move their concern for themselves to a concern for God. Yet they still hadn't done that spiritual heavy lifting that would prepare them to carry out his ministry on earth. And they asked him why they had failed, and it appears that they had failed because they had not silenced the conflicting messages inside themselves and given over even a tiny bit of faith to God. If they had even given over their faith, even if it was the size of a mustard seed, the power of their faith would blossom and grow. For the disciples, the inner demons of faithlessness, the inability to believe more in God than themselves, was significantly more entrenched than the demon of illness that they tried to cast out. And in the end, it seems that the disciples were the victims of their own attitudes. The only solution to battling inner demons is one's own conversion, one's own change and transformation inside, ridding ourselves of the thoughts that are destructive and counter to our faith, whether those just thoughts are about ourselves or about others. And self-examination is difficult, I know. But after we identify our inner battles that are keeping us from living as disciples of Christ, we have to work on our intentions toward ourselves and others every single day. We must decide to be positive about ourselves and others. We must decide to be kind. We must decide to be merciful. We must decide to be grateful. We must decide to be constantly supportive and uplifting of ourselves and others. And once we decide to practice those things each day, they will soon become natural to us. And those conflicting thoughts that do war in our minds will be silenced by godliness. Our attitude toward ourselves, our attitude toward others, and our attitude toward God will grow and blossom into something great and powerful. We all have inner demons telling us things that are not true and affecting our behavior, and are constantly struggling with them because we haven't brought them into the light of love and cast them out of our lives. It takes courage to ask ourselves what we are truly struggling with and to expose the things in us that are working against God's will for us. But when we do that work that Jesus bids us to do, we, like the earliest disciples, will find a great thing in this life. God was able to work with even the smallest amount of faith that is strong, observant, and open. And so that is our challenge in this passage, to offer up in the light of God's love those things which hold us back.